Sup y'all, and welcome to Population and Migration Unit 2, Part 9. In this video, we're going to take a look at this key question: what are some major migration flows over time? And to start, we're going to look at this map on major global migration flows from 1500 up to 1950. Now, this map shows you some major global migration flows from 1500 to around 1950, the beginning of the Cold War. Among the greatest human migrations in recent centuries was the flow from Europe to the Americas. Emigration from Europe began slowly. Before the 1830s, perhaps 2.75 million Europeans left to settle overseas, and that can be seen in migration streams numbers 1 and 2. Europeans also went to North America, Australia, New Zealand, and throughout Africa. The rate of European emigration increased sharply between 1835 and 1935, with perhaps as many as 75 million departing for colonies in Africa and Asia, and for economic opportunities in the Americas. As already discussed, the Americas were the destination of another mass of immigrants, African slaves, who were among the very first non-American Indian settlers in this country. And even as the Atlantic slave trade was in progress, the European impact was generating another major migration stream as well. The British, who took control over South Asia, transported tens of thousands of so-called indentured workers from present-day India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka to East and South Africa. And long before the British arrived in India, Hindu influences radiated into Southeast Asia, reaching the Indonesian islands, and later into places like Singapore. European colonialism also had an impact on regional migration flows in Southeast Asia. During the late 1800s and early 1900s, many Chinese immigrated to cities in the region to work in trade, commerce, and finance. Many remained, and today Chinese minorities in Southeast Asian countries account for substantial portions of national populations. And as you can see in the map, some Chinese also made their way over to the United States. Now, to take a look at an immigration law that restricted the migration of certain groups into the country, such as the Chinese into the United States, back in the 1880s, they were seen as a different culture whose traditions did not mix very well with the Americans in the West. Now, quotas were set for other groups, such as Northern or Western or Eastern Europeans, but Asians, and most specifically Chinese, were almost entirely shut out. Now, back to the map, we can see also that many Americans moved westward. But also we can take a look at the African American Great Migrations. Now, the first Great Migration between 1910 and 1930 was numbering around 1.6 million migrants who left mostly rural areas in the South to migrate to northern and midwestern industrial cities. After a lull during the Great Depression, a second Great Migration between 1940 and 1970, in which 5 million or more people moved, including many to California and other western cities. And a reverse migration has gathered strength since 1965, dubbed the New Great Migration. This is where many African Americans have returned to the South, generally to states and cities where the economic opportunities are the best. Aside from internal migration, there's also been a great deal of immigration coming into the United States for obvious reasons. Now, going back to the 1800s, when the United States was still very young, the United States opened up its borders and immigration began. In the late 1800s, you can see the impact of the Industrial Revolution, and of course the majority of migrants being from Northern and Western Europe. But there were also significant increases of Europeans coming from Southern and Eastern Europe, until you see it peak right around the time of World War I. Migration went down dramatically during the war, and then the United States went into a period of mostly isolation. And during the Great Depression, most people couldn't afford to move much anywhere. But the United States experienced a post-war boom after World War II and reduced restrictions. But as you can see, the increase in immigration since World War II has largely been from Latin America, and more increasingly from Asia. In 1965, the quota system that had existed for a long time was abolished, and you can see the rise of immigration from Latin America, and more recently, from Asia. Russia also experienced a major internal migration, but in Russia, people migrated east from the heartland of the Russian state near Moscow and St. Petersburg to the shores of the Pacific. During the Tsarist time between the 1800s and 1910s, and communist periods of the 1920s to the 1980s, Russian and Soviet rulers tried to occupy and consolidate the country's far eastern frontier, moving industries eastward, building railroads, and establishing a major naval base in the Pacific. By 1980, as many as 30 million Russians had moved out toward the borders.